Racing on ESPN Speed World. The NHRA, the world's largest motorsport sanctioning body, showcasing speeds in excess of 290 miles an hour and traveling the quarter mile in less than 5 seconds. Championship drag racing from the NHRA. 19 races across the United States and Canada comprise the $18 million 1989 NHRA drag racing season. Our most recent event was the 10th this year and the first in 2 years in Denver, Colorado. The Mile High Nationals return to the all-new Vandermeer Speedway, carved into the side of a mountain at over 5,500 feet above sea level. The Mile High saw 1988 Top Fuel champion Joe Amato resurrecting last year's car to win the event over current 1989 points leader Gary Ormsby. Funny car pilot Bruce Larson won his third event this year and opened up his Winston points lead over Kenny Bernstein as he defeated Mark Oswald. And defending Winston Pro Stock champion Bob Glidden chalked up his 6th season win and 73rd overall with a victory over Jerry Ekman in the Pro Stock Finals. Now the championship drag racing action moves further west for the second annual running of the Motorcraft Ford California Nationals. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave McClelland, and welcome to Sears Point International Raceway at Sonoma, California, just north of San Francisco. There has been a tremendous amount of dramatic action out on the racetrack for all 3 days of this California Nationals, and the excitement started in qualifying. Gene Snow, trying to push his Bueller into the 5-0s, had a perfect run going until something cut the left rear tire and sent the car hard into the right-hand guardrail. Luckily, the car stayed up against the guardrail and scrubbed off a lot of speed. As the guardrail ended, the car turned right and came to rest against a utility pole padded by tires. The safety safari and NHRA paramedic Ronnie Davis were on the scene immediately, where Gene Snow, winner of this year's Cajun Nationals, was found to have a broken collarbone. In slow-motion replay, it appears as if a part, possibly a weight from the front end, fell off, got under the car, and cut down the left rear tire. In this second angle, you can see that the loss of the tire sent the car into an uncontrollable hard right turn. It hit the concrete wall with such force that Gene Snow was knocked unconscious, unable to reach for the brake or otherwise control his dragster, which was still moving with considerable speed. As the guardrail came to an end, the car no longer had a barrier to scrub off speed or prevent it from turning right, and it veered straight for a utility pole ringed by impact-absorbing tires. The tire barrier caught the left rear wheel, long since stripped of its tire, and pulled a battered Gene Snow and his broken car to an abrupt halt. I'm happy to report that Gene Snow will make a full recovery, although he is expected to be out of competition at least 3 weeks to recuperate. Then, the next day in funny car qualifying, it was Mark Seaver in the far lane lined up against Gary Ritter in the near lane. Both Ritter and Seaver had big problems right off the starting line. Mark was able to get his car under control quickly, but Gary was in serious trouble. Unrelenting flames lapped the body, undercarriage, and rear of the car. Ritter deployed his chutes, but they burned on. He pitched the car sideways, bringing it to a halt, popped the emergency exit, but the fire just seemed to get more intense until the safety safari arrived on the scene seconds later. As the car was hosed down, Gary Ritter emerged, undoubtedly gasping for breath and unable to see, but obviously able to get himself over the concrete wall and out of danger. In replay, we can see the results of a broken connecting rod. It ignited an horrendous oil fire, which grew to engulf the entire car. Meanwhile, on the other side of the track, Seaver scraped the right-hand guardrail. He immediately popped his chute and got his car under control. Under control is not a phrase you would use to describe Ritter's situation, however. The oil fire grew to a point that it literally dwarfed the car. But one thing to notice, is that there is no fire behind the windshield. This fact gave Ritter time to concentrate on getting the car stopped and working himself loose from the seat restraints. Shortly after this scary incident, we talked to Gary Ritter in his pit area.
Actually, I didn't know it was on fire as bad as it was. It wasn't hot. It wasn't real hot. I felt a little heat, but not too much, and I wasn't really too concerned. I seen the fire in the windows, and I just pulled the fire bottles, and I was trying to get the seat belt off me. I was hung up on the shoulder, and I was about to panic. I was running out of air because I didn't get a chance to take a deep breath of air before that stuff got on me. And I came out after I got loose, and the first thing I did was raise the visor and get me a gulp of air, and then I rolled off the top, and then I felt the guardrail, and I rolled over the guardrail and just lay on the ground. I just trying to get some air.
What a wild ride for Gary Ritter. Now, that was yesterday in qualifying. But right now, the big story is in Joe Amato's pit area, right behind me, where we'll find my good friend Steve Evans.
David, just moments ago, a brand new power plant was hand-lifted into the frame rails of defending top fuel champion Joe Amato's dragster. Not unusual unto itself. The reasons why the change was necessary, well, that has been a hot topic. Earlier today, in round one of racing, it was Joe Amato against Jack Ostrander. As Amato neared the finish line, leading the race, a horrific engine explosion. Usually in a rear-engine car, not a big deal. Well, with a broken fuel line pointed right at Amato, it was a very big deal.
As Steve moved in for an interview, the safety safari was quickly on the scene. They hosed down Joe Amato, cooling him off after that hot ride.
The fire kept coming. I kept waiting for it to go away, but it must have been a broken fuel line or something that kept feeding it, you know?
Usually with a rear-engine car, you don't even know it's there.
I know, it's you know, one of them freak things. I hope we can fix the car and come back, though. We won the race, right? That's all that counts.
We'll let you go. How hot was it? Take a look at the helmet of Joe Amato, singed on both sides. The visor, well, you couldn't even see through it anymore. That will necessitate a helmet change as well. How violent was it? Well, some souvenirs at the far end of the racetrack. They took one bolt out of the oil pan and the entire crankshaft fell out of the engine. So Joe Amato has experienced total engine destruction. Not a part will be saved. Now, two big questions remain. Can this crack Amato crew get this car into the staging lanes? Round two is about to begin. They're scheduled to face Eddie Hill. If they make it, question number two, can they successfully repair all of the electronic fuel and clutch management systems? That really is the challenge. David?
Steve will be following the Amato story closely as we now proceed to round number 2 of Funny Car Eliminator. This is Tony McCollum, the Hayward, California contractor in his new Dodge Daytona-bodied funny car. His opponent will be John Force at the wheel of the Castrol GTX Oldsmobile. As John Force rolls through the water and gets the tires wet, he is headed towards the starting line to do a long, smoky burnout. Let's take a ride with him. The cockpit filling with tire smoke as our onboard camera riding with John Force shows you how he manipulates the controls to get that car backed up into the proper spot to race against Tony McCollum. Wayne Dupuis, the crew chief for Tony McCollum, setting him in the proper spot for his second burnout. Some cars doing 2 burnouts, others only the long single tire smoking one. McCollum qualified in the number 11 spot, and that earned him the right to race against the reigning Winston champion, Kenny Bernstein, the number 3 qualifier in round number 1. In the far lane was McCollum. Bernstein in the near lane. A very slight advantage was gained at the start by McCollum, and at the finish line, the upset of a lifetime. Tony McCollum defeated Kenny Bernstein.
Tony McCollum just held his breath, took a shot, and it paid off. Beautiful job.
Thanks, Steve. I knew we had a good chance that week because we never got a really good chance to make a full pass down this track. Because yesterday we ran a 57, that's what we qualified with, and we broke a throttle cable. And I know it had more in it. I never know what was the problem. I just said, just give it a chance and get us down the track, and I'll cut a light on him. I think we could do it.
That's got to be a confidence builder.
Thank you.
That win in round number 1 earned Tony McCollum the right to race against John Force, the number 7 qualifier, who defeated Jim Murphy in his first round race. Again, our onboard camera showing you John Force as he concentrates on the Christmas tree and rolls into those staging beams at the starting line. You'll notice in our in-car camera shot that John Force uses his right hand to hold onto the brake, his left hand grasping the butterfly steering wheel. The green light, then he holds on with both hands and defeats Tony McCollum by a car length at the finish line. Deploying the parachutes and again braking at the end of a 5:51, 272-mile-an-hour run, John Force turns off the racetrack. As we watch again, this was a close race between two great funny car drivers. A few hundred feet off the starting line, they are side by side. Force began to drift out of the groove ever so slightly, had to drive away from the center line and beat McCollum by more than a car length. Let's now ride a quarter mile with John Force. At the finish line, he hits the parachute, pulls the fuel shutoff, grabs the brake, and finishes another run in about 5.5 seconds.
John Force back on track at 5:51, but you got out of your tracks, and I thought, oh no, the center line.
Real nervous when you watch Bernstein go out and you watch these new guys coming up on the block. I always thought myself was a new guy, but I'm not. But I'm new back to the interviews. It's great to be here, huh?
Great to see you.
Well, I tell you what, we did a good job. The team did a great job, and it's starting to come around, so we ain't dead yet, gang.
What about that center line? Were you a little worried about that?
Yeah, she's been picking up the front end, and I cried about it to Coyle, and he said, Forrest, learn how to drive it that way. Okay, I'm doing the best I can. That's what we do.
Good to have him back indeed.
Steve, I'll certainly second that thought. The 1989 NHRA Motorcraft Ford California Nationals is being brought to you by Motorcraft. Get the peace of mind of doing it right with the right parts. Motorcraft quality parts. And by Firestone. Watch us. We're on the move. And by Budweiser. For all you do, this Bud's for you. More funny car second round action coming up next. Back at Sears Point International Raceway and the second annual Motorcraft Ford California Nationals, crew chief Tim Richards is directing the intense efforts to rebuild Joe Amato's top fuel dragster after that devastating explosion in round number 1. Meantime, on the starting line, Amato's teammate Bruce Larson, winner and there was no smoke off the tires on that burnout. That's a problem for Larson. These huge 17-inch wide slicks are designed to operate at high temperature, and the only way you can get them hot is to burn them. The crewman's putting Larson back. He's saying, go on back, further, back into the water, do another burnout. Larson did not get those tires hot. He is racing against Ed McCulloch, the number 2 qualifier at this event, and now that's what you call burning rubber. This is a very important round for Bruce Larson. He has the opportunity to extend his points lead even further, particularly when the number 2 man, Kenny Bernstein, went out with that big upset in round number 1. His competition, though, is Ed McCulloch, one of the toughest drivers and certainly one of the quickest cars, qualified number 2 at this race and beat Tom Hoover in his first round. Bruce Larson coming off a big win at Denver at Vandermeer Speedway when he took home the title of the Mile High Nationals. Larson at the wheel of the Century TAC engages Oldsmobile, having overcome the burnout problem, now staged to race McCulloch. And McCulloch with an advantage at the start. McCulloch drives away from Bruce Larson. 5.37 seconds his speed, 276 miles an hour, and Larson's points earning day is at an end. The next 2 cars already fired and coming out of the water. Here is the Dodge Daytona, the Hawaiian Punch Special of Roland Leon, driven by Jim White. White enjoying his best day on the track, qualifying with a fine 5.40, has got to run the quickest car at this race, the Pontiac of Don Prudhomme. 5.30 seconds, a new track record, was the time established by Prudhomme in qualifying. Steve?
Well, nobody has to tell Bruce Larson that he had the door open for him here with Kenny Bernstein going out round number 1. But, Bruce, how big a factor was the double burnout?
I don't think it was any. There seemed to be too much water on the tires. I'm not really sure. I haven't had time to think about it yet, but I don't think it was a factor at all. But we did really have a tire shake problem at half track, and that was my demise.
The fact that it fell off at 10th has nothing to do with dragging the clutch through that bad burnout.
No, it was tire shake.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
By virtue of his first round win, Larson picked up approximately 200 points on Bernstein in that very tight funny car race. Car owner Roland Leong has given Jim White a mark to aim for. That's exactly the spot that he wanted him to back over, so he knows that he's in the proper track. White qualifying with a 5:40 in the number 5 spot, beat Dale Baldy round number 1, while Don Prudhomme equaled his qualifying time of a 5.30 to put away Scott Coletta in his first round race. White in the far lane, Prudhomme in the near lane under the watchful eye of Chief Starter Buster Couch. They will stage these cars and then await the moment when Buster throws the switch for the green light. Problems for Jim White, and Prudhomme through the quarter mile at 5.38 seconds. His speed, 268 miles an hour. Incredibly consistent is Don Prudhomme. Meantime, back in the top fuel pit area of Joe Amato, the tires are being mounted, indicating they are getting close to the completion of the entire rebuild of the engine and drivetrain in this dragster. It looks like they're going to make the call for round number 2. At the Motorcraft Ford California Nationals, the work is done on the DRW special of Joe Amato, and it's head them up and move them out to the staging lane. There is one deviation from the norm, though. They have not fired the engine. They did not have time to find out if the motor will even run. That's an unknown quantity. Let's go down now to Steve with Don Prudhomme.
Well, this is the kind of weekend that Don Prudhomme and crew have been working for all season long. Snake Low qualifier at 5:30, now a 5:38 sends you to the semis.
Yeah, it's so far it's going okay, Steve. You know, we've just been struggling a little bit, but it's starting to come around, and we just got to run a little harder now.
You seem to be very conservative as far as not running the car any further than you have to take it.
Yeah, that's right. The car's been tearing the rear end parts up in it, and we've been having a lot of trouble with that, so we're just trying to cool it till we have to lean on it.
Living on the edge, Don Prudhomme. 2 cars remain in round number 2 of racing. It is the Motorcraft Ford Probe of the team of Candies and Hughes out of Houma, Louisiana, driven by Mark Oswald in the far lane against the brand new Thunderbird body car. It made its debut just a week ago. This is Art Hendy. This beautifully painted creation from the team of Hendy and Worship is one of those independent racers that has been most successful. He'll need every bit of performance that car has, though, as he is racing against one of the favorites. This is the man that won the title here a year ago, Mark Oswald. He beat Mike Dunn in the first round. Art Hendy, meantime, had a big victory over Richard Hartman to earn the right to race against the defending champ. The staging procedure underway. Both cars now set. And up in smoke goes Oswald, and Hendy loses traction. They both get back on the throttle, and Mark Oswald recovers first to take the win. An unimpressive 6.49 second elapsed time, but the thing that is notable, he had the win light in his lane. That sets up the pairings for the semifinals. Mark Oswald will race against Ed McCulloch, with McCulloch having the choice of lanes. Don Prudhomme against John Force. The Snake gets to choose the lane by virtue of his quicker elapsed time in round number 2. The word goes out to the top fuel racers. Gentlemen, start your engines. That phrase has particular significance for Tim Richards and Joe Amato, and the engine comes to life. As we told you, it was an untested piece. That engine had never been started prior to this moment, and now Joe Amato has got to take the car to the starting line to race against Eddie Hill. One question has been answered. Yes, it will run, but the second question is, will it be competitive? Has yet to be answered. As Amato rolls out of the puddle of water that helps those tires break loose, Eddie Hill goes into a strong burnout, and Amato's engine sounds very strong. A tribute to Tim Richards, the crew chief, and all the crew on Amato's car to be able to rebuild after such a disastrous engine explosion and fire that Joe suffered in round one. This is one of the more complex overhauls that any crew has been confronted with. Not only was the engine totally destroyed, but the clutch had to go. The drivetrain had to be completely replaced, and the electronic wiring harness that controls so much of the fuel delivery and clutch activation system had to be replaced because it was burned off in the ensuing fire after the engine let go. This was not the only scary moment for Amato. Yesterday, in a qualifying run against Dennis Forssell from Minneapolis, Minnesota, it was almost an instant replay of the Gene Snow incident. Watch Forssell's car in the near lane. At about three-quarter track, an intake valve broke. The engine exploded, blowing the left rear tire. Forssell had the driving job of his life to stay away from Joe Amato. After he brought the car to a safe stop, Forssell unbuckled his seat restraints and climbed from the car. Steve Evans was there and had a chance to talk to Dennis.
Well, you can see a tremendous blower explosion, and apparently a piece of that engine or blower punctured that left rear tire, blew it completely off the vehicle. Dennis Forssell is just fine. And Dennis, an incredible job at driving to keep away from Amato. You missed him by inches.
Yeah, well, it was fortunate. We were just able to keep it away from him because it sure wanted to keep going over that way.
It appears that the explosion blew the tire off.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. The blower came over the top of my head, and then it fell alongside, and the tire ran over it.
Tremendous job.
Thank you.
Dennis Forssell was able to rebuild his car, but he lost in a tire-smoking effort in round number one. Eddie Hill has got to think he has the advantage in this second round race against Joe Amato. In his first round victory over Jerry Beck, Hill carded a very competitive 5:11 elapsed time. For Amato, he's got the thumbs up to Tim Richards. All the gauges are reading okay. Now he's got to concentrate on getting a good start and just hope that all goes well in the performance department. A good start, and Amato pulls ahead. At the finish line, Joe Amato, what a job. 5.06 seconds. His speed, 282 miles an hour, as Hill fell far behind. A strong burnout by Jim Head. He is racing the current points leader in the Winston Championship chase. This is the Castrol GTX Special of Gary Ormsby. It is hard to describe the amount of effort that was put forth by Joe Amato's crew. That 5:06, the second quickest time of eliminations. Right now, Steve's with Joe Amato.
Unbelievable.
That's what you call a team, buddy. We got the best out there.
And you know, you never got excited in there. If you made it, you made it. If you didn't, you did it. You kept smiling. It was calm.
Well, Steve, you know, you have to stay calm, keep everybody else calm. Even though you got butterflies inside, I was nervous, but the Tim Richards and all my guys, they're the best.
Be honest with me. How did you feel it would run? Did you think it would even start?
Well, I knew it would start, but I didn't know what it would do going down the track because there was so much electronic stuff burned out of this car. All the teams came to help us. I mean, it was a joint effort from a lot of people, and we went out and put the wind light on. That's what it's all about.
If there's such a thing as miracles in drag racing, we just saw one.
Steve, we're also looking at a very happy man. Joe Amato advances to the semifinals. Back at the starting line, Jim Head, having completed his burnout, gets ready to pull forward. And a wave to starter Buster Couch. It was Jim Head that beat Dennis Forssell in that round number one race, while his competition, Gary Ormsby, the number 2 qualifier, beat Frank Cook in his first round race. Ormsby in the far lane. Jim Head with that huge wing out in front of those small front tires. That wing helping keep the front end on the ground. A good start. And the wing comes off Ormsby's car. Upside down, Ormsby is sliding along the guardrail. The spark generated by the roll bar scraping against the asphalt. It comes to a stop right in front of our camera position. Ormsby moving inside the car. The safety safari quickly on the scene. Jerry Grice in talking with Gary Ormsby as they hose down the engine to cut down the danger of fire. As we watch again in replay, all was normal at half-track. Then disaster struck. The wing strut collapsed. The wing came off. That unloaded the rear tires. The engine backfired. And then Ormsby had the ride of his life. The car barrel rolled sideways through the lights, backed into the guardrail. Then upside down began its sliding, grinding stop in the shutdown area at Sears Point International Raceway. The good news, Ormsby is uninjured, and Steve Evans is able to talk to him.
Well, with funny cars, we know it's fire. With top fuel dragsters, the most frightening thing that can happen just happened to Gary Ormsby. When the wing comes off that car, they unload, you're okay.
Yeah, Steve, I didn't know what had happened. It just took a big turn on me, and I didn't have any idea what happened.
It happened so fast, there's nothing you could do?
No, there was nothing I could do. Next thing, I was upside down, and I was just trying to stay in the car. Keep my hands inside the car. It wasn't the thing I could do when I got upside down.
Well, we're glad to see you're all right.
Thank you very much.
A final check of Gary Ormsby by emergency medical technician Ronnie Davis. Look at the roll cage. The slide down the asphalt nearly ground through the roll bar on Ormsby's car. Don't go away. There's more excitement coming from the Motorcraft Ford California Nationals. Back at Sears Point International Raceway in the second annual Motorcraft Ford California Nationals, I'm Dave McClelland along with Steve Evans, and this is Frank Bradley. Qualifying in the #1 spot for the third time this season, Bradley had a stunning 5.04 second elapsed time to lead this 16-car field. He is racing against Tulsa, Oklahoma's Mike Brotherton, who qualified 13th and beat Connie Coletta in round #1. It was a close race for Frank Bradley as he defeated Darrell Gwynn in his first round competition. Brotherton at the wheel of the Williams Telecommunications Group Speed of Light dragster is in the far lane. Bradley in the near lane comes in and is set in the staging beams. Brotherton up in smoke, and Bradley heads to the finish line. A big win at 5.08 seconds, 280 miles an hour. Some remarkable performances out of Frank Bradley. The engines are running in the burnout area for our next pair of cars. This is the Miller High Life Special of Dick LaHaye. His competition here in round #2 is Gordy Bonin. And an engine problem for Dick LaHaye. He pulls off to the side. He is out of racing. Gordy Bonin goes ahead with his burnout, and he blows the supercharger drive belt. Bonin's engine is still running as LaHaye comes to a halt. The engine exploding on the burnout, and an obviously disappointed Dick LaHaye unstraps himself and comes out of the car. What a break for Bonin. All he has to do is stage the car and get the green light. But he's got to keep the engine running. It's now without a supercharger system. It is running only on the fuel injection. As the blower valve being taken back to the push truck, Bonin is able to drive away from the starting line. He got the green light, and that puts him into the semifinals. A tough break for LaHaye, running very well, winner of the Summer Nationals, trying to catch Gary Ormsby for the points lead, to have the engine explode on the burnout. Right there, you saw the flash of flame coming out the side of the engine, indicating that something internally went wrong. Steve is with Dick LaHaye.
Well, Richard, there is no sadder way to lose than to explode one on a burnout. None I can think of, anyway.
I know it in all my years of NHRA racing and so forth. That's the first time anything like that's ever happened to me. I mean, I feel bad for the competitors behind me because I oiled the track in, and I just, I guess it happens to everybody at one time or another. We had our chance to jump in there and pick up a few points on Gary, but obviously we went out the same round, and what can I say?
No, you just said it all. Sorry to see that.
Thank you, Steve.
What a break for Gordy Bonin. He now advances to the semifinal round of competition, but he races the toughest of them all, the very consistent Frank Bradley, with Bradley having lane choice. The other pair finds Jim Head, winner over Gary Ormsby in that exciting moment against Joe Amato. And Joe chooses his lane as a result of his 5:06 elapsed time. We're back at the second annual Motorcraft Ford California Nationals, and it's time for the semifinal round of Pro Stock Eliminator. These are the factory hot rods. Here is the Pennzoil Pontiac of Jerry Ekman racing against the AC Delco Oldsmobile of Warren Johnson. Johnson, qualifying in the number 12 spot, is enjoying a fairly good day on the racetrack. He's been trouble-plagued throughout the season. In round one, he beat Reed Wisnett. Larry Morgan fell to Johnson in round number 2. Meantime, Jerry Ekman qualified 10th, upset the number 2 qualifier Don Beverly in round 1, and beat Darrell Alderman in the second round. These cars limited by the rules to 500 cubic inches. They run on racing gasoline and use 2 4-barrel carburetors. These 2,350-pound cars are some of the most sophisticated racing machines in the world. Lots of RPM out of those big engines. The advantage at the starting line to Warren Johnson. And he holds on by just a matter of a few feet to defeat Jerry Ekman and advance to his second final round appearance this season. His time, 7.48 seconds. Ekman's time, a quicker 7:46. The advantage gained at the start by Johnson is what won this race. Look how close it was. Steve?
You know, Warren, Jerry Ekman has been winning a lot of races with hole shots, but you live by the sword and you die by it. You hole shot at him.
That's exactly right. I think that's probably about the best thing there is as far as this. You just try and do your best, and if you have to live by the hole shot, you sooner or later going to die by it. There's no doubt about it. I'd rather drive consistently.
Very close race.
Thank you. Thank you.
Warren Johnson moving into the finals. Jerry Ekman coming over to offer his congratulations. Johnson will run the winner of this race. Bob Glidden in the near lane in the Motorcraft Ford Probe against the Strozlite Pontiac of Ricky Smith. Smith is noted for his ability to leave the starting line with an advantage. In fact, in round number 1, he defeated Bruce Allen, the low qualifier, and Butch Leal in round 2. Meantime, Glidden topped Mark Powick in his first round race and beat Kenny Koreski in round 2 action. We're on board with Bob Glidden as he brings his car into the staging beams, getting himself set in the near lane. Glidden in the Ford, the Pontiac of Ricky Smith. They're both waiting the green light. Glidden dumps the clutch, pulls the handles on the shifting mechanism that changes gears in the transmission, and Glidden, by more than a car length, goes into the final round to race Warren Johnson. Deploying the parachutes in the shutdown area, Bob Glidden makes yet another final round appearance. His time against Smith, 7.37 seconds. That earns him the lane choice over Warren Johnson in the Pro Stock Final. Funny Car semifinal racing coming up next. John Force closing the escape hatch on his Oldsmobile-bodied Funny Car as he gets ready for his semifinal round race against Don Prudhomme. Force in the far lane, put there by Prudhomme, whose Skoal Bandit had a quicker elapsed time in round number 2. That gave him the right to choose the lane. John Force getting ready to pull the lever that richens the engine for more power. A quick check of the controls. He waits for the green. And a great start. But Prudhomme powers past him at the finish line and goes to the finals. Another incredibly consistent time for Prudhomme. 5.35 seconds his speed, 268 miles an hour, as John Force, unhooking his seatbelt, falls to his self-admitted hero, Don Prudhomme. Back at the starting line, the engine coming to life in Mark Oswald's Funny Car. The burnout procedure already underway for the Miller High Life Oldsmobile of Ed McCulloch. As Mark Oswald rolls forward to begin his tire heating procedure, let's go to the far end of the track. Steve Evans is with John Force.
Well, all of us went on that ride with John Force. Unfortunately, we all came up just a little bit short. A tremendous hole shot, though, 7/100ths of a second.
Well, the way he's been running, that's what we needed, and what can I say? It just wasn't our day.
But an encouraging day.
Very exciting weekend. Anytime you can race heads up with Don Prudhomme, you know the story there. I mean, it makes it good, but it still hurts real bad.
know it does, John.
After winning 3 races last year, John Force is finding this 1989 season very tough to make it to the winner's circle. Under the direction of his crew chief, Bernie Federle, Ed McCulloch pulling into the staging beams here in the near lane of the racetrack. Mark Oswald on the far side, getting himself set. Both cars ready. A close race. And Mark Oswald with a hole shot defeats Ed McCulloch. He had the advantage at the starting line. It paid off. His elapsed time, 5:49. McCulloch's time, a 5:47. McCulloch was actually quicker, but Oswald had the advantage at the starting line. And as we see in the instant replay, just a couple of feet separated those 2 cars at the end of the quarter mile. Our final round, Don Prudhomme against Mark Oswald, with Prudhomme having lane choice.
Well, the finals in funny car will look exactly like the finals did here 1 year ago. You and the Snake, Mark.
I hope the results are the same, Steve. I swear we've run 5:30s and not been able to do this good. I'm having a blast.
You've got to get out of the 5:40s if you're going to beat him.
Yeah, we put a new combination in for that run just to we wanted to force his hand. We wanted him to force him to beat us. We hadn't been down the track yet today, and we got there now. We can, the way it felt, we can improve on it.
Hope you can.
Thank you.
Top Fuel semifinals coming up next. Back at the Motorcraft Ford California Nationals, Gordy Bonin is enjoying quite a return to drag racing. The 6-time national event winner has been out of competition for 10 years. The last thing he drove was the funny car. Now he is at the wheel of the Top Fuel dragster in the far lane of the racetrack. Did you know that you can become a member of NHRA for just $38 a year? You'll receive 48 issues of National Dragster and a copy of the award-winning Diamond B video, Decade of Thrills. Call this number today. Here in the semifinal round, Gordy Bonin has quite a mountain to climb. He's racing the incredibly consistent car of Frank Bradley, the Enco Agriculture Services Special. Bradley's got quite a celebration going. He just got married on Thursday. Both cars ready. And up in the air goes Gordy Bonin. A couple of wheel stands out of Bonin. He has to shut off, and Frank Bradley, with an elapsed time of 5.10 seconds, goes into the finals of the California Nationals. Talk about a tough task. Jim Head is racing Joe Amato. If you'll remember, it was in round number 2 that Amato had the second quickest time of elimination, that 5:06. Now his crew has had a chance to fine-tune that new engine combination. Let's go to Steve.
For years, the Northern California fans have cheered this man in good times and in bad. Today, they're hollering themselves hoarse. Frank, a 5:10 sends you to the finals.
I love it.
Are you just leaving it alone and letting the air in the track kind of dictate the elapsed time?
Well, pretty much. You know, we've had some low ETs here lately, and been a lot of tire smoke, so we're trying to keep it a little soft on this deal, keep it from smoking tires.
It's going to cool off before the final. You know that. It always does here.
Oh, maybe we'll try to step on a little bit then.
Frank Bradley. So good to see him having fun for a change.
Fun it is, Steve, and did you notice the gleam in his eye when he talked about stepping on it? He's already got the quick time of the race. Frank Bradley into the finals. He will race the winner of this confrontation, Joe Amato, against Jim Head. Both engines running very cleanly on the starting line. And Head instantly goes up in smoke. Joe Amato with a 5.09 second elapsed time. That earns him the lane choice in the finals against Frank Bradley. What a race that set up to be. Almost identical were their times here in the semifinals. Joe Amato and Frank Bradley. Amato, 100th of a second quicker, gets to pick the lane in the finals at the California Nationals. Back at the second annual Motorcraft Ford California Nationals, I'm Dave McClellan, along with Steve Evans, and we're to the final rounds of competition. In Pro Stock Eliminator, the Oldsmobile of Warren Johnson squares off against the Ford Probe of Bob Glidden. We're inside Glidden's car as he begins to concentrate on the starting line procedures that will bring him to a staged situation and hopefully a green light. Glidden, 9-time Winston champion, looking for his 74th victory. Johnson has yet to win this season. Glidden concentrating on the tree, leaves the starting line. In 7.5 seconds, he must perform his job flawlessly. He pulls ahead of Johnson and wins his 74th national event title. Sons Rusty and Billy once again high-fiving on the starting line. And look at the time, 7:33. Do you think Bob Glidden's happy? I would certainly say so. Here now as we watch in replay, a good start by both drivers, nearly identical reaction time. But very quickly, the Ford began to pull ahead as Johnson started to drift towards the center line and had to drive away from it. That cost him time, but the 7:33 by Glidden was more than enough to put away Warren Johnson.
Bob Glidden, 74th win, closing in on the historic 75, and a good, clean final. Clean staging, clean race.
Everything went really great, Steve, here for us, at least for this race. Johnson finally got his act together, it looks like a little bit. He's been in the cellar, so to speak, most of the season, and, you know, he did a great job here fighting the track conditions and getting to the finals. We simply made a superb run, and it couldn't have gone better for us.
You seldom say superb, but a 7:33 is indeed that.
We made a great run on this racetrack.
Good job.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks a lot.
This man may win 100 before it's over. Maybe 150.
I'll take it.
I'm sure he will, Steve. The winningest driver in drag racing history, Bob Glidden, adds another trophy to the shelf. On the starting line, burnouts completed, the finals in funny car. Mark Oswald in the Candies and Hughes entry. Defending champion here at Sears Point International Raceway squares off against the consistently quickest car of the race, Don Prudhomme. Some 4,000 horsepower on tap from each of these nitro-burning engines. Oswald gets the advantage. And from behind, Don Prudhomme wins the California Nationals title. Don Prudhomme's elapsed time, 5.32 seconds, 272 miles an hour, and Mark Oswald was close behind with a 5:36. 0.02 of a second was the advantage Mark Oswald had when he left the starting line. But by the time they neared the finish, he was watching Prudhomme begin to pull ahead, and at the end of the quarter mile, you can see the margin of victory, a half a car length.
Did you know that you had won, Don Prudhomme?
Well, about a half track or so, he spotted me a little on the start line. It seemed like about a half track, it started to make its move, and once it started pulling, and he kind of faded away.
You know, in your own words, when you win, you like it to be a throat-ripping, back-breaking performance. It was.
Well, you know, it really was, but the crews had a lot to do with it, and Skoll and Performance Corner, Pontiac, all those people. But, you know, a kid by the name of Don Gay Jr. I'd really like to dedicate this race to.
Very, very nice. He, by the way, is doing very well in the Houston hospital. Just had skin grafts, and they expect him out of there shortly.
Yeah, we've been keeping track of him. I just hope he gets well soon, gets back racing.
Don Prudhomme, what a nice thought. And, of course, Don Gay Jr. just might owe his life to Don Prudhomme in that emergency situation we saw at Denver.
Steve, one more race remains. The finals in Top Fuel Eliminator. Meet Maggie Bradley. You probably never had the chance to see Maggie before, but this whole week has been a dream come true for her, culminating now with her husband, Frank, in the final round of Top Fuel at the second annual Motorcraft Ford California Nationals. Earlier, Steve had a chance to talk to Maggie.
Frilly blue decorations on Frank Bradley's trailer. Rough and tough Frank Bradley. Well, there's a reason for this. His friends have strung these all around the trailer because Thursday, just before qualifying began, Frank Bradley took the lovely Maggie as his bride. Congratulations.
Thank you, Steve.
As a longtime drag racing enthusiast, you don't object to this kind of honeymoon one bit.
Not at all. In fact, this is the only kind of honeymoon I'd ever hoped for.
Now, what wedding present would you like?
Well, of course, to win this race.
Well, before that happens, let me see this. We wondered what Frank did with his bonus qualifying money from Englishtown. I think I just found it. That's beautiful.
Thank you very much, Steve. The man has good taste.
Steve, it's going to take more than good taste to make it to the winner's circle here in Top Fuel as Bradley is racing against Joe Amato. Amato earned lane choice with his 5:09 in the semifinals. And an engine explosion for Joe Amato right out of the burnout area. Amato grenades the engine just as we saw Dick LaHaye do earlier. He pulls off to the side, and Frank Bradley will get a single run. What a disappointment for Amato and his entire crew after all the efforts they have put forth to make it here to the finals. Let's watch again. First a flash of flame, then the big explosion. As Amato now out of competition, and Frank Bradley will single and fulfill the wish of his new bride, Maggie, to take home the Top Fuel title at this California Nationals. Maggie cheering him on. She knows now all he has to do. And Joe Amato cheering too. He's standing on the guardrail looking down at the engine with a shake of the head. He knows the moment for Bradley. So does starter Buster Couch over to offer his congratulations. All Bradley has to do now is stage the car. He can idle it through to take home the Top Fuel title. The crew wiping down the tires as Bradley stages for the last time. Elated anticipation, that would be the description of Maggie Bradley as she watches Frank take the green light. And he's not idling through. Joe Amato, with a clap of the hands, watches Bradley run 5.09 seconds at over 281 miles an hour. Look at Maggie go. Now that's a happy lady. Graham Light, NHRA's Vice President of Technical Operations, the next to receive the congratulations from Maggie Bradley. Junior, there's a hug for everybody there. All that's left for Joe Amato and his crew is to pick up the pieces and think about what might have been. Let's go to Steve with the champion.
David, these Northern California fans on the hillsides down here in Sears Point, and Frank, they started their celebration when they heard Amato pop.
Well, I'm sorry to hear Joe do that, but I've done it myself, you know, so that's drag racing.
Wouldn't you call this the race of your career today, this whole weekend?
Probably. Right in my backyard, married, everything went smooth. Yeah.
You cut a 4-1 light, the reaction time of your life the previous round.
Yeah, everything's going pretty good. Maybe it'll keep going that way.
And Maggie, what a wedding present.
I bet she's jumping up and down, huh?
We're going to find out in just a second. David?
Frank, I'll bet you're right. Maggie was jumping on the starting line. For Steve Evans, I'm Dave McClellan saying so long from Sears Point International Raceway. The 1989 NHRA Motorcraft Ford California Nationals has been brought to you by Motorcraft. Get the peace of mind of doing it right with the right parts. Motorcraft quality parts. And by Firestone. Watch us. We're on the move. And by Quaker State Motor Oil. The big Q stands for quality, always has, always will. Coverage of the NHRA California Nationals has been a presentation of Diamond P Sports.